Now, once you start to build more complex websites with WordPress and you had more content in there, you're going to have some way of able to filter, sort, search, and so on. You want the end user to find what they're looking for very quickly. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to be taking GridBuilder WP for a spin, who have kindly sponsored this video, but as always, no opinions. I'm just going to demonstrate how this function works so you can make a more informed decision for yourself. So GridBuilder WP allows us to very easily create sorts, filters, and all those kinds of good things. These are referred to as facets, and that's exactly what we're going to create today. So here's a very simple example. I've set up a recipe blog, and as you can see down the left-hand side, we've got a set of different search, sort, filtering options. So these, like I say, are called facets, and we have 4 different options. So we can do things like sort things based upon the recipe name. So we can go from alphabetical A to Z or Z, or Z to A, whichever way you want to go about it. So that's pretty cool. You can also add in calories per serving, which is being pulled from advanced custom fields. So you can see we can use this nice simple slider and we can filter our results. We can reset that. We can go through and set things up based upon the number of servings. Again, we can use this based upon ACF meta fields. And we can also go in and choose what recipe type. So we're pulling this from a category. So for example, we might want desserts. All pretty cool. But you'll also notice that these are working in conjunction with each other. So servings and the recipe type are all in the same filter. So we're filtering things based upon multiple different criteria. Put that back, you'll see we open up more options. Now we're just looking at desserts. Pretty powerful and also incredibly easy to set up. So let's take a look at replicating what I've got here using GridBuilder WP. For this example, I'm going to be using Bricks Builder alongside GridBuilder WP, but you don't have to. You can use shortcodes. You can use this with native Gutenberg. You can use it with Elementor. There's lots of different options. Setting the facets up is the key thing here, though. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come into the dashboard. We're going to go into WP Grid Builder and come down to all facets. And inside there, you can see we've got one set for pagination, but we're going to create our own. So let's click Add New. And this opens up the ability to create facets. So let's give this a name. We'll say sort recipes. And then you can see we've got 3 different tabs: general, conditions, and advanced. We'll go through each of those in a moment. So the first thing we've got is the behavior. In other words, what kind of facet or filter do we want to create? Open this up and you can see we've got a range of different options available. We're going to choose in this example to sort content. And you'll see the options underneath then change based upon what we choose in the behavior. So the first thing you can see is sort options. We can have multiple different options here. We can stack them on top of each other for all manner of different sorting options. So you can sort things based upon their title, price, calories, all those kinds of good things. So we're going to keep this relatively simple. I'm going to say sort this by the name. So we'll say recipe name, A through to Z, and then we can choose order by. In other words, what are we going to order it by? Where do we want to grab this information from? So this example is going to be the post title. But you can see as we scroll through, there's an awful lot of different options that allow us to do things like sort whatever we want to do. So for this, let's set this up to be working with the post title, and then we can choose the order, whether we want to be descending or ascending. So set that up to what you want. Then you can come down and add another option. So we'll say add a second option in. We'll simply copy this, change that. Again, we're going to say order by, post title, and we set the opposite for the order. Okay, so there we've got the basics. If you want to use a combo box option, you can do. You can also come into conditions and choose where and when this will be displayed if you don't want it displayed all the time. So we'll take a little look inside here. You can see we can add a condition. We can select what we want to do, whether we want to hide, reveal, disable, or enable it. So for example, we may say we want to hide this, add a condition. What's our first condition? Select the data that we want. So again, you can see we've got lots of options here. So we may want to limit this to based upon only logged in users or logged out users or registered users and so on. Well, you can set that option inside here. We can set we want to compare it with, and we can set a value. So we can say logged in, for example, and now we can check that status and show or hide that facet based upon that condition. And you can, if you want to, add multiple conditions here for and or conditions. Lots of great options here. For this example though, we don't want to worry about that, but the conditions are there should you want them. Then if we come into advanced, we can give this some naming. So we can name the facet for the slug and we can give the slug a title. So we'll just say sort recipes. You can also apply a generated CSS class. If you want to target this via CSS, you could do that. But we're going to keep, like I say, this relatively simple. We'll click save. and we've now created our first facet for sorting. So now we can go and add that into our overall design. So I've already created a page. In this example, we have a post loop for our recipes, and this will show all the recipes at the moment. So we want to put this filter or facet in the left-hand section. So let's do just that. We'll open that block up. We'll come over to our elements and we'll search for facet. We'll click to add that in, and we now have our first facet. So let's rename this. We'll call this sort facet. And now once we've got that set up, we can come over to the left-hand side and we can choose what facet we want. So we'll select that. You can see there's our sort recipes, what grid or element you want to apply this to. And this is the way that it works when it comes to facets and GridBuilder WP. You just tell it what these facets actually relate to on the page. So in this example, we've got a bricks recipe card, which is what you can see on screen right here. I'll select that. And we can also select a style. Now I'll come on to styles a little later and show you briefly how they work. But now one of the nice new things that we have with GridBuilder WP version 2 is the ability to style our facets and create multiple different styles if we want to use them in different parts of our site, which is pretty cool. We'll choose global style number 1, and I'm going to pop over into my style section, and I'm going to come into layout and set this to be 100% width. So that'll take up the full space of this left-hand side. So now let's save this. Let's preview it, and we have our first filter or facet enabled. So you can see we can set our recipes, and you can see they now go from A through to Z in alphabetical order, or the alternative in reverse. Pretty cool. But that's a really simple option. But like I say, you can stack more of these on top of each other. Let's take a look at some more facet options that we have to work with additional data inside our listing. So let's add another new facet in. So we'll add new. This time we're going to call this calories. Now what we can do is we can set our behavior again. So this time we'll choose an option. We're going to say we want to filter content. We're going to choose the filter type. So you can see we've got different options here again, but this is just choosing what type of filter do you want to apply this to. So for this example, we're going to use the nice range slider, but there are lots of options inside there. What's your data source? So again, we're using the same thing. And you can see we've got posts, terms, and users. There's lots of ways in which we can filter our information. For this example, we're going to open this up. We're going to get rid of this categories, and we're going to type in calories. Now you can see we've got this ACF recipe additional fields calories, and you've also got a couple of other references underneath to it. This is a custom field created inside Advanced Custom Fields and associated with our post. So we can filter not only native WordPress information, but also custom information from things like Advanced Custom Fields, Metabox, and so on. So let's choose that field. We're going to leave the select value as it is. Now you can see we've got compare type, inside selected range, surround, or intersects. There's various different options on how this range slider will work. We want a really basic one just to allow us to set the minimum and maximum values. You can see we've got a reset label to reset this, which has a nice little button in for us. We've also got these additional advanced options. So you can set a prefix, a suffix, the step intervals. So if you've got something with really large numbers, let's say, for example, you're dealing with real estate, you may want to jump up in $10,000 pound units, whatever it is. You can set those intervals inside here so your range slider doesn't become absolutely massive. Now, the other good thing to note is that this actually pulls the information from the minimum and maximum values it finds inside that custom post type and that custom field. So we don't have to set those values if we don't want to. We can also set things like our decimal separator and so on. So we can set what values we want inside there. All pretty cool. And we're just going to add in calories or cals for this example. Again, you've got your conditions. Come into advanced. We'll give this a title. You can see the facet slug. Again, we've got the class and everything inside here. Once you've got everything set up, we'll click save. You'll also notice this says indexing. So what this is going to do is it's going to look at the type of facet we want to create, go back to that information inside your database, find all the values, the number of records and all those kinds of things, and use that to speed up working with these facets. Again, let's go back into our design. Let's go and add another facet in. So again, we're going to come over to the right-hand side. We'll select where we want this to go, search, add another facet in, select that facet, rename it just for good measures so we know exactly what each one relates to. And again, when I come to the left hand side, you can see there's our calories. We'll choose the option to associate this with our loop, And again, select our style and finally come into our layout and set this to be 100%, so it takes up the full width. And as you can see, there's our title, there's our calories and everything else, and our reset button, so that's now in place. So again, if we hit save on this, and let's go and add one more in, and then we'll test these out. So back into WP Grid Builder, add a new one. Finally, we're going to call this one recipe type. The facet action of filter content is perfectly fine. Again, checkboxes is fine, but you can see we've got a lot of different options inside here. Tons of options inside here, including things like search fields, autocomplete, and so on. It's really cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to say content type to filter. Again, it's going to be post. We're going to change this from categories though. We're going to use a custom taxonomy I've created using advanced custom fields. So select value. We're going to put in recipe type. And then you can see recipe types. Once we selected that, you can see we've got these advanced settings. Let's open those up. And what you can do inside here is you can choose to include or exclude specific terms. So you may have terms inside your taxonomies that you don't want to include for some reason, where you can simply come in and choose not to include them. You can also choose the term depths if you're using hierarchical setup, where you've got multiple different levels of parent, child, grandchild, and so on. You can set how far down you want to go, etc. You've got tons of options here. Then you've got your ordering, so you can set up information here, limit the number of choices. You've got tons and tons of categories. And you can also expand and collapse button labels. So you want to open this up. If you've got multiple categories, you want to have it compressed, you have those options available. You also notice underneath you've got ways in which this checkbox can work. We can set this to work up as an and or operator, so we can control how this information interacts. Then you've also got some options underneath for how you display it. So you may have categories that have no content in. You can hide those automatically, which will probably make sense because there's nothing there. You can also show the count, show current terms, children, whether it's hierarchical and so on. Now, for my example, I don't have any hierarchy in there. It's a simple setup. So we're going to leave those as they are. Come into advanced, leave everything inside here except for the title, and we're going to say recipe type. And we'll click save. Again, you'll see this will now go and index everything for us behind the scenes. And now we can just add that new facet into our design. So for the final time, let's do just that. Let's duplicate this one just for speed. We'll change this over, rename it to recipe type, change this from our calories and set this up to be working with recipe type. Everything else is perfectly fine, so we can leave all that. And you can see that now pulls in the recipe type, including those different taxonomies. So now if we click save, we can test this out on the front end and see how it all works. So there are our 3 different facets included. So we can see we can adjust our calories. You see that now filters things down. We can also say we want only main meals, and you can see that filters that down. We may say we don't want that, we want just desserts. You can see that changes and filters everything down for us. Quickly, I just want to go over how you can set up these global styles. This is a new feature that we've added in to GridBuilder WP version 2. Makes it so much quicker and easier to style things, to have the consistency without your entire design. So you come back into your dashboard, under WP Grid Builder, you'll see we've got this all styles option. You can select that and you can see I've got 2 styles here. Let's open up my global styles. We'll choose to edit this. And now you can see this shows us an example. In this case, we've got these sort of multi-choice options. And you can change this based upon what you want from the top. So for example, the range slider, you can choose that. It'll show you an example. You can also see what these will look like on different devices. So if you want to check that out, pretty cool. Then on the right-hand side, you can see we can customize with various different aspects. The title, for example. And you can see this is very much sort of Gutenberg-centric or WordPress core-centric. So if you're used to working with that, this is going to feel very, very familiar and simple. But you can see we can change things like the height. We can adjust things here. So you can see we can adjust the line. We can adjust borders. We can add shadows. We can add background colors. We can adjust the range progress, the range thumb, range values, the button itself. Come into one of the other options, like, for example, a drop-down. Let that preload in, and you can see you've got a different set of options inside here now, so you can customize these to your heart's content. And then you can save them and you can reference them inside the editor at any given point. For me, this is one of those key things that makes working with this so much easier now. So even if you only want to use the facet side of things for filtering and searching, the ability to be able to create these styles, to have that consistency with the rest of your design all inside here, is a real benefit and a boon to the new version. Anyway, that's what I wanted to cover. If you want to check out the previous video, we took a look at actually using the card designs. You can check out that video right here, right now. As always, all applicable links are in the description. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.